I want you to do a quick visualization exercise with me. Wherever you're listening to this, unless you're behind the wheel of a car or something, just close your eyes for a second.
Always a good disclaimer.
Right, yeah, safety first. But I want you to picture a Buddhist monk. Just go with the very first completely unfiltered image that pops into your head.
And I can almost guarantee what you're seeing.
Exactly. If you are like, the vast majority of people on this planet, you're seeing the robes, like that vibrant saffron or maybe that deep, rich maroon color.
Yep, the shaved head.
The shaved head, yeah.
Yeah.
You see a figure sitting in a full lotus position, probably in a perfectly raked Zen garden or, a quiet, misty temple high up in the mountains somewhere.
Yeah.
And above all else, this figure is just completely serene.
It is the universal archetype. It's the absolute picture of stillness, of silence, and just, non-attachment.
So if I asked you, or really anyone walking down the street, what that specific monk believes in, particularly when it comes to the concept of like a supreme creator or external gods, the answer is almost universally the same.
Right. They believe in nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, well, to frame it more accurately according to, the standard textbook definition, the concept of a creator god simply doesn't apply to them.
Right.
Buddhism is widely categorized, especially in the Western academic tradition, as the ultimate atheistic religion. There's no divine architect judging human actions from above. It is presented purely as a philosophy of mind. The core tenet is understanding suffering, achieving the cessation of that suffering, and ultimately reaching a state of emptiness, the void.
Which makes it the perfectly rational religion. And let's be honest about our own culture for a second here. That atheistic rational framing is exactly why Buddhism sells so incredibly well in the West today.
Oh, absolutely.
It just dovetails flawlessly with a modern, secular, scientific worldview. You can be this hyper-logical tech executive in Silicon Valley. You can completely reject any notion of the supernatural or magic, and you can still proudly call yourself a practicing Buddhist.
Because the version we get is essentially sold as secular mental hygiene.
Yeah. It's like a gem for your mind.
But, and this is the big but, we have to recognize that what we are discussing is a highly curated, almost sanitized public relations version of the tradition.
Right.
It's the paperback philosophy you pick up in an airport bookstore.
And this is where the premise of our entire deep dive today comes into play. Because the stack of source material we are looking at today, it completely shatters that peaceful, atheistic image.
It really does.
We are diving into the research and the lived experience of a highly controversial, just utterly fascinating figure who argues that Buddhist atheism isn't some ancient philosophical truth.
No, not at all.
He argues it is a massive, centuries-old strategic lie.
Yeah, the source material introduces this profound cognitive dissonance. When you actually look at the historical texts and the actual ground-level practices in places like the Himalayas, you do not find a quiet, atheistic philosophy.
No, you find something entirely different.
You find an environment completely saturated with deities, incantations, and rituals that are designed to actively manipulate reality.
I am looking at descriptions in these texts that do not resemble meditation. Not the way we think of it. They look like straight-up sorcery.
Right.
So the mission for this deep dive is to figure out how we got from active, desperate worship to peaceful, godless mindfulness. But to even begin unraveling a contradiction of this magnitude, we have to look at the lens of the guide who compiled this research, because he is not looking at this through like a typical academic framework.
Not even close. Our guide through this material is a man named Osman. He's frequently referred to in the text as the blind Muslim yogi. And his resume is what makes his historical analysis so completely unique. Osman is a master-level bioenergy healer. He has 50 years of rigorous practical experience, maintaining an active practice dating all the way back to the 1970s.
Okay, let me stop you right there because I have to play the skeptic for a second. When I first read his credentials, in the brief specifically terms like bioenergy healer and telepathic healing and utilizing principles of quantum physics and entanglement, my internal alarms just started ringing.
Which is totally fair.
Because to a layperson, those sound like science fiction buzzwords that someone uses to sell healing crystals. Like, how does someone actually use quantum entanglement to heal a physical body?
It's a vital question, and we really have to define the mechanics of what he claims to be doing here. When Osman refers to quantum entanglement, he isn't using it as a mystical metaphor. He is applying the literal physics concept of non-locality to the human nervous system. So, in quantum physics, two particles can become entangled, meaning the state of one instantly influences the state of the other, regardless of the physical distance between them.
Right. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance.
Exactly. Osman's 50 years of practice operates on the premise that human bioenergy fields, which are the localized electromagnetic fields generated by our nervous systems, can achieve a similar state of resonance.
Okay, so to put that in, like, physical terms that I can wrap my head around, think of two tuning forks.
Good analogy.
If they're calibrated to the exact same frequency and you strike one, the other one across the room will begin to vibrate without anyone actually touching it. It's acoustic resonance.
Yes.
So Osman is suggesting that through decades of intense training, he has learned to calibrate his own nervous system to act as, like, a master tuning fork, resonating with and altering the energetic frequency of a patient, even at a distance.
Precisely. That is the mechanical basis of what the texts label telepathic healing. It is not reading minds. It is inducing a resonant physiological shift.
Wow.
And his specialization is not minor ailments. He specifically deals with critical care, severe trauma recovery, and terminal illnesses. He is operating at the absolute extremes of human biological failure.
Which requires an insane level of dedication. The sources note that he attained his first samadhi, which, for those who don't know, is this absolute peak state of non-dualistic concentration. He attained that at the age of 19.
Which implies a level of neuroplastic conditioning that is just difficult to comprehend.
Right. Most 19-year-olds are, struggling to figure out their college major or their social identity, and he was already locking his brain into prolonged states of absolute singular focus.
It reminds me a lot of the discussions on the Huberman Lab. Professor Andrew Huberman talked extensively about the biological mechanisms of meditation and neuroplasticity.
Oh, yeah. I love that show.
Like in his episode with Dr. Sam Harris, they dive deep into how focused attention literally rewires the neural pathways over time.
Right, the brain is plastic.
Exactly. And in another Huberman episode with Dr. David Spiegel, they talk about hypnosis and profound trance states, and how changing your nervous system state can fundamentally alter pain perception and bodily healing.
Yeah, and Huberman also had Dr. Matthew Walker on to talk about how restorative states repair the body on a cellular level.
Right. So when you take the science from those Huberman Lab episodes and you apply it to Osman doing this for 50 years, attaining samadhi at 19, you start to see the biological scaffolding for what he's doing.
It's not magic, it's extreme biological training.
Furthermore, his education spans multiple continents and traditions. He studied widely across the Far East, the Middle East, the West, and the texts even explicitly mention his study of Centaurian knowledge.
Right, I have to throw the flag on the play again. Centaurian knowledge. Like the star system, Alpha Centauri.
I knew you were going to ask that.
Because if I am listening to this, I need to know right now if we are suddenly talking about ancient aliens, because that changes the entire credibility of the discussion for me.
It is a totally fair point of contention.
Yeah.
But in the context of these highly esoteric texts, Centaurian does not mean he is communicating with extraterrestrials.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah, no UFOs here. It is a classificatory term used in certain hidden lineages to describe pre-human or non-human energetic frameworks.
How does that mean exactly?
Essentially, it refers to systems of reality manipulation that predate recorded human civilization. It deals with the raw geometric structures of energy rather than human cultural myths. It is the absolute deep end of the metaphysical pool.
Oh, I see. So it's like studying the source code of the universe before the human user interface was built on top of it.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
And speaking of dedication to that source code, we have to talk about his practice schedule. The texts state that at certain stages in his life, he was practicing up to 18 hours a day.
18 hours.
That leaves 6 hours for sleeping, eating, and, basic biological functions.
Yeah.
Even now, after 50 years, he practices 8 to 10 hours a day just to, as he calls it, sharpen the sword.
And that sheer volume of practice is exactly why his perspective on history is so critical for us. Osman does not read ancient Tibetan texts the way a dusty Oxford historian does.
No.
An academic looks at a ritual and sees a cultural artifact. Osman looks at a ritual and reads it like an energetic mechanic looking at an engine schematic.
Yeah.
Because he works in critical care, he understands the sheer, raw, energetic output required to move the needle on physical reality, to actually halt a disease or alter a physical state.
He knows the difference between a metaphor and a mechanism.
Exactly.
There's also a very specific contextual note about Osman that we really need to clarify for you guys listening. When you dive into his work, he uses incredibly vivid, highly detailed visual descriptions of these energy structures.
Yes, he does.
And the reason he can do that is because he only became permanently blind recently, in May of 2023. For almost his entire life before that, he had normal eyesight.
Which is just an invaluable asset for translation.
Yeah.
He possesses 50 years of visual memory, so he can bridge the gap between the unseen, energetic world he currently navigates and the visual world that we inhabit. He uses metaphors and descriptions grounded in a lifetime of sight.
Now, whenever we discuss someone with this level of claimed mastery, the immediate cynical assumption, and I definitely had it, is that there's some massive paywall or some insular cult dynamic hiding the knowledge.
Right, the guru trap.
Exactly. But Osman operates on a radically different, highly pragmatic model.
He operates with a strict ethical duality. On one hand, he is deeply committed to democratizing the baseline technology. He offers a completely free 5-minute yoga and meditation program. It's available for download on his website, yogawellness786.com, and on his YouTube channel.
A free 5-minute program.
Yes. He wants the foundational software to be accessible to anyone without any financial barriers.
But on the other hand, he draws a hard line when it comes to the heavy lifting.
Exactly. For individuals facing severe, life-threatening situations who require his master-level capabilities, he offers intensive energy healing and one-on-one consultations. Those are premium services. And they are not inexpensive, reflecting the immense energetic toll and the half-century of 18-hour-a-day dedication required to execute them.
Which makes sense.
Right. You can also access paid live daily video lessons and group sessions through his Patreon. But crucially, he insists these services are purely complementary. They are designed to enhance conventional medical treatments, absolutely never to replace them.
It is a deeply grounded, practical approach. He's not telling you to leave your doctor.
Never.
So, we have established the guide. We have an energetic mechanic with a sharpened sword of perception. When a guy like that turns his attention to the actual historical practices of Tibetan Buddhism, what does he see that the rest of us are just completely missing?
He sees a landscape saturated with literal gods. He exposes this glaring contradiction between what we are told Buddhism is and what it actually does. Let's look at the textbook narrative again. Siddhartha Gautama wakes up under a tree, realizes the nature of suffering, and tells his followers, be a lamp unto yourself.
Right, it's the doctrine of supreme self-reliance.
But you journey into the Himalayas, into the heart of Tibetan Tantric Buddhism, and you immediately encounter the invocation of deities, specifically figures like Tara.
And we need to be clear about who Tara is, because in the West, we really tend to soften these figures into like gentle psychological archetypes.
We do, we sanitize them. But in the Tantric tradition, Tara is one of the Mahavidyas. These are the great wisdom goddesses.
Okay.
But wisdom in this context does not mean book learning or gentle guidance. The Mahavidyas represent raw, untamed, terrifying cosmic forces. They embody the mechanics of time, absolute destruction, death, sex, and resurrection.
And it is the methodology used to interact with these forces that completely upends the atheistic narrative for me. The practitioners in these monasteries are not sitting in quiet, mindful contemplation, gently noticing their breath and reflecting on Tara as a concept of inner courage.
No, they are using loud, rhythmic, physically exhausting incantations.
Right.
They are actively attempting to summon an external entity for direct physical intervention. This is where we encounter massive semantic gymnastics from Western academics.
Oh, the mental hoops they jump through.
You walk into a Tibetan temple and you are visually assaulted by wrathful deities. You see statues of beings with blue skin, protruding fangs, necklaces made of freshly severed human heads, surrounded by halos of roaring fire. The monks are chanting frantically, offering intense rituals to these figures. Yet the academic literature will cleanly categorize this as paying respect to psychological archetypes.
I just cannot accept that logic. It completely falls apart under pressure.
How so?
Think about it. If you are walking down a dark alley and a guy steps out with a knife, how does a psychological archetype save you?
It doesn't.
Exactly. You don't use a frantic, desperate, sweat-inducing incantation to change your mind. You use an incantation because you are trying to change reality. If an invading army is burning down your village, you do not need a metaphor for inner strength. You need an intervention.
It is a fundamentally different mechanism. Contrast a modern mindfulness app on your phone whispering, "Notice your thoughts drifting like clouds," with a Tibetan monk desperately chanting to a fanged, fire-breathing goddess dancing on a human corpse.
Right.
The app is designed for stress reduction in a safe environment. The incantation is designed for survival in a hostile reality.
And this reminds me so much of some of the conversations on the Joe Rogan show.
Mhm.
Like Joe Rogan constantly talks about extreme physical states and
Oh,
survival.
yeah, absolutely.
In that episode he did with Wim Hof, they talked about how extreme stress, like freezing cold water, forces the autonomic nervous system to adapt.
Yeah.
You can't just think your way out of the cold. You have to physically alter your breathing to survive it.
Right.
And then Rogan's episode with Graham Hancock, they talk endlessly about lost ancient civilizations and how ancient people possess technologies or ways of interacting with reality that we've just completely lost touch with.
Yes. And even his episode with Dennis McKenna discussing plant medicine, they touch on how these altered states of consciousness aren't just inner psychological trips. They often feel like contacting non-local external entities.
Exactly. So when you look at these Tibetan monks through that lens, they aren't just meditating. They're engaging in extreme physiological and energetic technologies to survive.
Which brings us to the obvious, glaring question. If this practice looks exactly like theistic protection magic, and it functions mechanically like theistic protection magic, why does the entire modern world firmly believe Buddhism is a purely atheistic philosophy?
Yeah. How did that PR campaign become so successful?
And this leads us to Osman's core historical hypothesis, which is honestly a geopolitical thriller.
It really is.
He identifies this phenomenon as strategic denial, or the survival hypothesis. To grasp this, we have to pull the camera way back and look at the geopolitical reality of Asia over the last 1,000 years.
Okay.
You have Tibet, situated as this isolated, highly esoteric spiritual fortress up in the mountains, and right next door, sharing a massive border, you have the successive dominating empires of China.
Right, from the ancient imperial dynasties all the way through to the modern era. And if you look at the operating system of the Chinese state historically, it is heavily influenced by pragmatic, militaristic philosophies. Like, think of Sun Tzu's The Art of War.
Exactly.
The paramount values are absolute order, social stability, pragmatism, and central control.
Now, I want you to put yourself in the mindset of a secular Chinese general or an imperial magistrate from the Ming or Qing dynasty.
Okay.
You march your occupying army into Tibet to establish the emperor's dominance. You walk into one of these monasteries, perhaps expecting to find some quiet, passive philosophers that you can easily subjugate.
Right, some guys sweeping the sand.
But instead, you enter a room filled with skulls, fire, and hundreds of men chanting powerful acoustic formulas to fierce, fanged deities that supposedly have the power to alter physical reality and defeat enemies.
To a secular general whose entire job is maintaining the absolute authority of the emperor, that doesn't look like a quirky local religion. That looks like a magical insurgency.
It is a direct existential threat to the state. An external deity that can intervene in reality completely bypasses the authority of the emperor.
Yeah, you can't control that.
And the historical response to that perceived threat was absolute, unmitigated devastation.
The numbers cited in the source material from Osman's research are just staggering. We were talking about over 1 million Tibetans killed over the centuries.
Yes.
And the texts specifically link this massive scale of slaughter directly to the state's terror of these practices. They weren't just killing people, they were actively trying to eradicate the worship of these fearful deities.
They burned the texts, they destroyed the temples, and they tried to wipe the mechanics of this magic off the face of the earth.
So we have to ask, how does a culture survive when faced with an overwhelming military force determined to annihilate its core spiritual technology?
They adapt. They use camouflage.
It is the ultimate survival tactic. I mean, think about it. If an invading army kicks in your door because they are terrified of your weapons, you hide the weapons.
Right.
You look the Chinese general in the eye, you point to the giant, terrifying statue of the fanged goddess, and you lie. You say, oh, her, please don't worry about her. She's just a metaphor. We don't believe in external gods. We're totally harmless, atheistic philosophers just like you. This is all just a complex psychological exercise.
It is an act of pure, terrifying desperation. A conscious, strategic lie told to avoid mass execution. But here is the profound tragedy of historical time.
What's that?
If you tell that lie to a general to survive the winter, and then you have to teach that lie to your children so they don't get executed, and they teach to their children, what happens?
The lie becomes the truth.
Eventually, over a span of centuries, the camouflage becomes the skin.
Wow. The survival strategy permanently morphs into the accepted doctrine. The Buddhist atheism that, Silicon Valley executives love so much today might literally just be the lingering, calcified echo of monks begging not to be slaughtered.
It completely reframes our understanding of religious history.
You know, this whole concept of survival mechanisms really makes me think of some of the stuff discussed on the Mel Robbins podcast.
Oh, how so?
Well, Mel talks constantly about how the nervous system adapts to trauma and survival. Like in her episode with Dr. Russell Kennedy, they talk about how anxiety isn't just in the mind, it's trapped in the body as a survival response.
Right.
And in her interview with Dr. Ramani Durvasula, they dissect how people adapt to survive highly toxic, controlling environments by masking their true selves.
That's a brilliant parallel.
And even Mel's famous 5-second rule, it's a physiological interruption to break out of a paralyzed mental loop. What these Tibetan monks did was essentially a generational survival response, masking their true practices to survive a toxic, violent occupier.
Exactly. And to prove that this is not an isolated geopolitical anomaly, that religions consistently use this specific type of camouflage under imperial pressure, Osman points to the exact same pattern occurring under a completely different empire, applied to a completely different set of practices.
We have to look at the British parallel,
Yes.
because it is crucial to remember that Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, was Indian. The religious DNA, the absolute source code of everything we are seeing in Tibet, is inherently Indian.
It all traces back there.
So, the texts ask us to examine what happened when the British Empire collided with Hindu Tantra.
The collision between India and the British Empire was a profound clash of fundamental worldviews. The British colonial administrators arrived with a distinctly Victorian gaze.
Stiff upper lip.
Very much so. They were products of the Enlightenment, of Protestantism, of strict social decorum. When they ventured into India and encountered the native ground-level tantric practices, they were horrified.
Because they weren't seeing gentle yoga stretches in a brightly lit studio.
No, they were seeing animal sacrifice. They were seeing the worship of Kali, a goddess who makes Tara look tame. They were seeing rituals involving blood, intense sexual practices, and fire.
To the Victorian mind, this was the absolute height of barbarism and savagery.
But the British methodology of suppression was distinctly different from the Chinese military approach in Tibet. It was rarely outright slaughter.
Okay.
The British utilized a much softer, more insidious, and highly bureaucratic pressure.
Wait, so instead of swords, they used, like, civil service exams.
Yeah.
How do you bureaucratize magic out of existence?
By controlling the economic and social pathways to survival. The British used shame, mockery, economic disenfranchisement, and massive educational reform. They established a system where, in order to be taken seriously, to get a job in the colonial administration, or to be considered a civilized human being by the ruling class, you had to thoroughly distance yourself from the magic.
You had to sanitize the savage.
Precisely. So the Indian intellectuals of the time realized they were being locked out of their own society. To survive and thrive under the British, they aggressively shifted the focus of their religion. They took the fierce tantric magic, the blood, and the raw power, and they buried it deep in the shadows, far away from the colonial administrators.
And in its place, they brought forward and heavily promoted the aspects of their tradition that the British would find palatable.
Yes, they emphasized vegetarianism, high Brahmanic philosophy, and non-dualism.
Why?
Because an abstract, philosophical, non-dualistic religion closely mimics Western monotheistic Protestant values.
Oh, wow.
It was a cultural defense mechanism. It was a way of signaling to the British, look, we are just like you. We have a very clean, intellectual, highly moral religion.
So you're telling me that the peaceful, perfectly branded Lululemon-wearing yoga studio version of Hinduism we get in the West today is basically a product of Indians trying to please 19th century British aristocrats.
The sources strongly suggest that the raw, untamed elements were pushed to the absolute fringes. The mechanics of the technology were hidden to protect the practitioners from Victorian ruin.
Did they just completely eliminate the real, reality-bending power of the practice just to look respectable?
They didn't eliminate it, they obscured it. And you can see this tension historically. Look at figures like a Ramakrishna. He was a radical ecstatic who worshipped Kali directly, diving into these raw, energetic states.
Right.
But then his famous disciple, Swami Vivekananda, goes to the West in the late 1800s. He speaks at the Parliament of Religions in Chicago, and he presents this incredibly eloquent, philosophical, sanitized version of Vedanta.
Because he knew the West couldn't handle the raw Kali work.
Exactly. Or look at Paramahansa Yogananda and his famous book, Autobiography of a Yogi.
Oh, that book is a classic. Steve Jobs gave it out at his funeral.
Right. And Yogananda talks extensively about miracles, cities, and yogic powers, but he packages it within a deeply devotional, almost Christian-friendly framework to make it palatable for a Western audience.
He bridged the gap.
Yes. And similarly, look at Swami Sivananda of the Divine Life Society. He systematized yoga into a highly accessible medical and ethical framework, again, sanitizing the terrifying tantric elements to make it a science of wellness.
This sanitization process is actually a huge theme on the Ranveer show.
Oh, beer biceps.
Yeah, Ranveer Alabadia. His podcasts on Indian history and spirituality are wild.
They really are.
Like, he had Rajarshi Nandi on to talk specifically about left-hand tantra and the worship of fierce deities like Bhairava and Chinnamasta. And Nandi explicitly talks about how these powerful, terrifying practices were driven underground by societal and colonial pressures.
Right.
And in another episode with Dr. Manish Pandit, they dive deep into the actual acoustic science of mantras, how it's not just a prayer, it's a sonic weapon or tool.
Yes, the acoustic resonance again.
And even Ranveer's episode with Amish Tripathi, where they decode ancient Indian mythology as literal history. It all points to this idea that the magic was real, but it got hidden.
And this established historical pattern, religions actively hiding their fangs and their operational magic from powerful occupying forces, brings us to Osman's most controversial and disruptive assertion about the origins of Buddhism itself.
This is the part that completely rewrites the timeline. If atheism, philosophical abstraction, and metaphorical interpretations are demonstrably historical defense mechanisms used to survive empires, then we have to unmask the original Buddha.
Osman's conclusion is a logical bombshell. If the lack of gods is a modern camouflage, then the original historical Buddha likely believed in a god.
Wow.
Furthermore, he was likely an active practitioner of the Tantric order.
That challenges the entire bedrock of Western academic consensus.
It shatters it.
The textbook image of the secular philosopher sitting under a tree merely figuring out human psychology just evaporates.
And we are watching the profound irony of this historical cycle play out in the modern world right now. Tibetan culture, as we speak, is still under immense geopolitical threat. The authentic lineages, the lamas who hold the unbroken transmission of these practices, are continually forced to flee their homeland.
And where are they finding refuge?
They are opening monasteries in the West.
The absolute irony. The West fell head over heels in love with the fake, sanitized, atheistic, philosophical version of Buddhism. Yet, the West has now become the primary safe haven for the authentic, deity-worshipping, incantation-chanting lineages fleeing persecution in the East.
It requires a simple yet devastating logical deduction. If the most authentic, direct, unbroken lineage of Tibetan Buddhism, the ones actually fleeing the Chinese state today, contains the most gods, the most terrifying deities, and the most intense incantations,
then the original source code they are protecting must have contained gods as well. It is staggering.
Yeah.
We are not just talking about a quest for personal enlightenment anymore. We are talking about centuries of brutal war, imperial pressure, and the desperate, bloody act of a culture trying not to be erased from the earth.
And this reframing is something Rainn Wilson actually explores brilliantly on his Soul Boom podcast.
Oh, I've heard of that show, Dwight from The Office, right?
Yes. But his spiritual interviews are incredibly deep. Like his episode with Reza Aslan, they discuss the history of God and how humans constantly project their own societal fears and structures onto the divine.
Right.
Or his conversation with Arthur Brooks about the science of suffering and joy. It highlights how these ancient systems were designed to handle extreme suffering. And in his episode with Richard Rohr, they talk about alternative orthodoxies and hidden lineages, how the true mystical heart of a religion often survives on the fringes, away from the institutional power centers.
Which perfectly aligns with what happened in Tibet and India. The real power was pushed to the fringes. And this is exactly where I want to connect this vast, sweeping geopolitical history back to Osman. Why does his work as a bioenergy healer make this hidden history so vital for us today?
Because it shifts the context from history to utility. Let's bring it back to Osman's 50 years of critical care experience. When Osman looks at these suppressed ancient rituals, he isn't seeing quaint cultural myths that we should preserve for a museum.
What does he see?
He is seeing a lost technology.
Let's really dig into that phrase, a lost technology. If these incantations, these energetic invocations to figures like Tara, were actually practical, verifiable methods used to heal trauma, protect the physical body, and alter localized reality,
Yeah.
then their suppression means humanity literally lost the software of the human spirit.
Exactly. We lost the software because the hardware of invading armies,
Yeah.
the swords, the guns, the bureaucratic institutions was too threatening.
Man, that is bleak.
But this is where Osman's mechanical understanding becomes crucial. He argues that these rituals were not superstitious pleading, they were precise physiological protocols.
Okay, break that down for me mechanically. How does an incantation to a fanged goddess actually function as a technology?
In Osman's framework, you have to look at the human nervous system as an incredibly advanced transceiver of electromagnetic energy.
Okay, I'm with you.
When a practitioner performs a specific rhythmic incantation, they are not just making noise. They are generating specific acoustic frequencies designed to trigger precise neurochemical cascades in the brain.
Which alters the state of the body.
Yes. This, in turn, alters the localized electromagnetic field generated by the heart and nervous system. The visualization of the deity, the fangs, the fire, the specific geometry of the mandala acts as a focal point to lock the mind into a state of absolute unwavering concentration, much like his early experiences with samadhi.
So the deity is essentially a mnemonics device or user interface
Yeah.
for a specific energetic frequency.
Exactly.
Just like I click an icon of a mail envelope on my computer to open a complex coding architecture that sends an email, the practitioner clicks on the visualization of Tara to access a specific frequency of bioenergetic resonance.
That is a highly accurate analogy.
Okay, so this brings to mind some of the heavy hitters in the wellness and personal development space. Lewis Howes's School of Greatness podcast covers this kind of territory all the time.
Yes, absolutely.
Like he had Tony Robbins on. And Tony is the absolute master of state change and bioenergy. Tony doesn't use the language of tantric deities, but he teaches people how to use their physiology, their breath, and their focus to radically alter their bioenergetic state and literally change their reality.
Right, it's the modern secular application of the same underlying technology.
Exactly. And Lewis Howes also had Dr. Joe Dispenza on, talking explicitly about the quantum field, neuroplasticity, and how changing your internal energetic frequency can lead to spontaneous physical healing.
Which is exactly what Osman is doing.
Yes. And Lewis also interviewed Deepak Chopra, who wrote Quantum Healing. Chopra talks about how consciousness is non-local and how the mind can influence the physical body at a quantum level.
So when that resonance is achieved by the practitioner, the localized energy field can interact non-locally. Remember the quantum entanglement we discussed to influence the energetic field of another person.
Leading to the rapid physiological shifts Osman observes in his critical care practice.
Precisely.
This also deeply connects to the concept of Kundalini energy.
Oh, definitely.
I was listening to the Buddha at the Gas Pump podcast with Rick Archer.
Great show for this topic.
It really is. Rick had Dr. Bonnie Greenwell on, and she is a massive authority on Kundalini awakenings. And she talks about how this energetic awakening isn't just a peaceful philosophical realization. It is a violent, raw, physiological rewiring of the nervous system.
Yes, Gopi Krishna wrote extensively about this too. His autobiographical accounts of Kundalini awakening show how dangerous and physically overwhelming it is if you don't have the right protocols.
Right. And Rick Archer also interviewed Swami Sarvapriyananda about non-dualism and Adyashanti about the reality of awakening beyond concepts. The consensus across all these guests is that the true energetic reality is vastly more complex and physically demanding than the sanitized mindfulness we get today.
But because the Chinese generals and the British administrators didn't understand the physics of the software, they just saw the scary icons on the screen and smashed the computers.
That is such a tragic way to look at history.
It is. But the ultimate goal of Osman's life work is to boot that system back up.
Okay.
He isn't just healing people, he is actively, methodically trying to bring this lost technology back into the light. Because he operates in the modern world, in an environment largely free from that specific historical fear, there are no imperial magistrates threatening to execute him for his practice.
Right. He's safe.
He has the luxury of stripping away the centuries of camouflage.
He can unsanitize the science. He doesn't have to pretend it's just a peaceful metaphor anymore. He can focus purely on the raw, scientific, results-based mechanics of the energy.
And because he understands the sheer life-altering power of this technology, he has structured his life's work to make it accessible but safe.
Yes, and this is the vital, practical takeaway for everyone listening to this deep dive. Osman's mission is to simplify these incredibly complex, historically obscured protocols.
He has spent a lifetime trying to achieve the maximum energetic result with the easiest possible methodology.
It reminds me of the Diary of a CEO podcast with Stephen Bartlett.
How so?
Well, Stephen is obsessed with high performance and demystifying complex concepts. In his episode with Mo Gaudat, they break down the actual algorithm and logic of happiness.
Right.
And his interview with Jay Shetty explores how you can take the mindset of a monk and practically apply it to modern life without retreating to a cave.
Yes, stripping away the dogma to find the utility.
And Stephen also had Dr. Turas Swart on to talk about the neuroplasticity of visualization, basically proving the scientific mechanics behind the law of attraction.
Yeah.
Stephen's whole show is about finding the highest leverage, most effective tools.
Which is exactly Osman's goal. He wants to revive this lost science because it can profoundly improve every aspect of our modern society, not just health, but mental peace, relationships, even our basic interaction with reality.
Which is why the structure of his offerings is so important. He provides the entry-level operating system for free.
Exactly.
I want to highly, highly encourage you to go to his website, yogawellness786.com, or find him on YouTube. He offers a completely free 5-minute yoga and meditation program.
It is specifically designed as a safe, simplified entry point to start installing the software in your own nervous system.
You don't need to engage with any premium services to access this foundational knowledge. He gives away because he believes humanity needs it.
But for those who require the absolute peak of this technology, those dealing with severe illnesses or requiring one-on-one master-level consultation, he offers his Patreon channel.
Right.
That is where the paid live daily videos, online lessons, and premium energy healing services reside. And they reflect the intense 8 to 10 hours of daily sword sharpening he still maintains.
And those premium services are not inexpensive, but considering the source, it makes complete sense.
But again, we must emphasize, it is a complementary technology. It functions alongside, not replacing, modern medicine.
Absolutely. So let's take a breath and look at the massive terrain we have covered today. We started by picturing that peaceful, quiet, atheistic monk sitting in a Zen garden.
We did.
Then, we shattered that image by looking through Osman's highly trained, energetic lens. The blind Muslim yogi showed us a completely different reality. We confronted the glaring paradox of Tibetan tantric gods and the fierce cosmic power of deities like Tara.
We explored the brutal reality of strategic denial, where the fear of Chinese military persecution forced an entire culture to disguise their magical technology as atheistic philosophy just to survive.
Right. And we saw that exact same pattern of camouflage happen when the British Empire used shame and bureaucracy to sanitize the savage beauty of Indian Tantra.
And we arrived at the startling, history-altering revelation that the original Buddha was likely not a secular philosopher, but a practitioner of a profound theistic, reality-bending energy technology.
A technology that was suppressed, hidden in the shadows, and nearly lost to the modern world, but is right now being meticulously revived and scientifically applied by dedicated masters like Osman.
It fundamentally changes how we view the narrative of human spiritual development. It reminds us that the clean, sanitized world we navigate every day is often built directly on top of a much more powerful, complex, and untamed reality.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over.
Okay.
Think about the deepest religious, spiritual, or even secular philosophical beliefs that you hold dear right now. The ideas you consider to be absolute ancient truths.
Right.
How much of what you believe is actually true, and how much of it is just the lingering echo of a political survival strategy? If the Chinese emperors had never marched their armies into the Himalayas, and the British had never colonized India with their Victorian shame, would we look at a statue of the Buddha today and see a peaceful philosopher? Or would we see a powerful sorcerer?
That is a fascinating question.
Keep looking beneath the surface.